On the evening of January 2nd, 2000, the quiet town of Asheville, North Carolina carried its usual winter calm. Holiday decorations still clung to porches, a reminder that the new millennium had just begun. But for 18-year-old Zebb Quinn, the night marked the beginning of a mystery that would leave family, friends, and investigators searching for answers for decades. Zebb was a shy but kind young man, working at a local Walmart and spending his free time with friends or immersed in video games. He was described as gentle, dependable, and someone unlikely to ever invite trouble into his life. That night, however, something drew him out, setting in motion a chain of events that remain as unsettling today as they were then. After his shift ended, Zebb made plans with a co-worker and friend, Robert Jason Owens. The two were supposed to look at a car Zebb was interested in buying, a goal he had been working toward with quiet determination. To those closest to him, it was a sign of his independence taking shape. Leaving work, Zebb appeared relaxed, optimistic even, about finally owning a vehicle he could call his own. He drove away in his Mazda following Owens, unaware that he was steering toward the edge of a puzzle that has never been solved. The night air was cold and darkness fell over the mountain roads as the two vehicles slipped away from the bright lights of Walmart. Zebb was last seen alive not long after. From that moment, his story fractured into strange clues, contradictions, and chilling silence. A young man on the cusp of adulthood simply vanished, leaving behind only whispers of what might have happened on that winter night. What happened next has haunted investigators for years, because it marked the first signs that Zebb's evening was far from ordinary. As Zebb and Owens drove toward the car he wanted to see, Owens later told police that Zebb suddenly flashed his headlights, signaling him to pull over. They stopped near the roadside and, according to Owens, Zebb seemed rattled, agitated by a page he received on his beeper. This was long before cell phones were common, and a page often meant urgency. Owens said Zebb became flustered, telling him he had to leave immediately, before driving off in such haste that he accidentally rear-ended Owens' truck. The impact was minor, but it left a dent. Zebb reportedly apologized quickly and then sped away, leaving Owens confused and alone. That version of events was always strange, but it became even more suspicious when Zebb never returned home that night. His family grew concerned almost immediately. Zebb was responsible and close to his loved ones. It was unlike him to simply vanish or fail to check in. By the following day, his mother filed a missing persons report. Police began retracing his last known movements, questioning Owens, who repeated the story of the roadside encounter. The odd detail about the page, however, raised eyebrows. Who had contacted Zebb that night, and why did it cause such an abrupt change in his behaviour? This question became one of the earliest threads investigators tried to follow, yet every tug seemed to lead nowhere. Instead, more unsettling signs began to surface, each one making Zebb's disappearance feel less like a misunderstanding and more like something darker was unfolding beneath the surface. 2 days after Zebb vanished, the mystery deepened when his 920 Mazda protege was found abandoned in a parking lot near a hospital, just a short drive from his workplace. At first glance, the car seemed intact, but a closer look revealed details that chilled both investigators and Zebb's family. On the rear windshield, someone had drawn a pair of lips in bright pink lipstick, a bizarre and unsettling symbol with no clear meaning. Inside the vehicle lay a collection of items that only deepened the confusion: a hotel keycard, a jacket that didn't belong to Zebb, and several empty drink bottles. None of it fit with who he was or with the plans he had made that night. Even stranger was the absence of anything that might point to his whereabouts. There were no signs of a struggle inside the car, no blood, no evidence to suggest a violent encounter. Yet the scene felt staged, as if someone had placed those items deliberately to mislead investigators. The lipstick in particular gave the impression of a taunt, a message meant to provoke rather than explain. For Zebb's loved ones, the discovery was devastating. His car, once a symbol of his growing independence, had become a vessel of unanswered questions. Police canvassed the area, but no one recalled seeing the vehicle being left there. The hospital parking lot was busy and often overlooked, the kind of place where a car could sit unnoticed for hours, even days. Investigators began to wonder, had Zebb himself parked it there? Or had someone else been behind the wheel that night, leaving it in plain sight as part of a larger, more sinister plan? Of all the strange threads in Zebb's disappearance, none pulled tighter than the role of Robert Jason Owens. As the last known person to see him alive, Owens became the reluctant centerpiece of the investigation. He told police that Zebb had sped off in a panic after receiving a page, but the longer detectives looked at his story, the more cracks appeared. Why hadn't Owens reported Zebb missing right away? Why did he wait until police came to him? His silence in those critical first hours weighed heavily on the case. When officers examined Owens more closely, they noticed fresh injuries, scratches on his face, bruises, and even a fractured rib. Owens claimed it was the result of a separate car accident after Zebb left, but there were no clear witnesses to confirm the story. Investigators couldn't shake the feeling that his wounds told a different tale, one that might have unfolded the same night Zebb vanished. Then came the chilling discovery about the page. Records revealed the call had come from Zebb's aunt's home. She was shocked when questioned, explaining she hadn't been there at the time. Someone had used her phone without permission, raising the spectre that Zebb had been deliberately lured into leaving with Owens. Whether the page was a coincidence or a calculated trap, it marked a turning point in the case, a moment where suspicion hardened into dread. For Zebb's family, hope was colliding with fear. They wanted to believe in his safe return, but each new detail hinted that something far darker had happened along those mountain roads. The search for truth was no longer just about finding Zebb. It was about unravelling the secrets of those who'd been with him that night. As days turned into weeks, investigators struggled with a case that offered more questions than answers. Zebb's disappearance left behind no ransom notes, no confirmed sightings, no traceable leads to follow. Friends and family organised search parties, combing wooded areas and rural roads, but every effort ended in heartbreak. It was as if the young man had been swallowed whole by the night. His mother, Denise, clung to hope with an unwavering determination, plastering missing posters across Asheville, speaking with reporters, and begging anyone with information to come forward. Her voice carried the weight of a mother's desperation, and her persistence became the heartbeat of the search. Meanwhile, detectives worked to piece together a timeline. The abandoned Mazda with its strange contents continued to trouble them. The lipstick marking felt theatrical, a cruel flourish. The jacket and hotel keycard belonged to no one in Zebb's circle, raising the possibility that they had been planted as red herrings. If the car had been staged, it suggested that whoever was behind Zebb's disappearance wanted to confuse police, to cloud the truth with smoke and mirrors. Attention inevitably circled back to Owens, but without direct evidence, investigators were left with only suspicions. The lack of forensic proof, combined with Owens' insistence on his innocence, meant the case remained frustratingly stagnant. Asheville, a town unaccustomed to mysteries of this magnitude, watched as the weeks stretched on. A sense of unease grew among its residents. If someone could vanish without a trace here in their quiet community, then perhaps no place was truly safe. Months passed, and with each season that changed, hope dimmed just a little more. Yet the mystery of Zebb Quinn refused to fade quietly. Detectives pursued every tip, no matter how faint. A handful of reported sightings trickled in. People swore they had seen a young man resembling Zebb in nearby towns, walking along highways or sitting in diners. Each time investigators rushed to follow up, only to find that the leads dissolved into nothing. It was as if people wanted so badly to believe Zebb was out there, alive, that they conjured him from shadows. Behind the scenes, investigators began quietly building a more unsettling theory, that Zebb had not simply vanished by chance, but that his disappearance was the result of a carefully orchestrated act. They considered whether jealousy, hidden rivalries, or secrets within his circle of friends might have played a role. Zebb was by all accounts a kind, introverted young man, but even lives lived quietly can brush against darker undercurrents. One troubling detail soon emerged. Zebb had been romantically interested in a young woman, and she had a complicated history with someone close to Owens. Could this have been a spark for conflict? Investigators were cautious about revealing too much publicly, but the possibility of a love triangle, or at least romantic tension, became another lens through which to examine the disappearance. Still, without Zebb's body, without physical evidence, and without a confession, every theory hung in limbo. The Quinn family continued to wait by the phone, holding on to hope, even as the silence around their son grew heavier with time. For the town, the story of Zebb Quinn was no longer just a missing persons case. It was becoming a haunting, a riddle with no clear answer that cast a shadow over everyone who knew him. By the time a year had passed, Zebb's case had become one of Asheville's most perplexing mysteries. His face lingered on missing posters that had begun to fade and curl at the edges, weathered by sun and rain, but his memory remained vivid in the hearts of those who loved him. For his mother, Denise, every day without answers felt like an open wound. She spoke often of Zebb's gentle nature, how he never liked conflict, how he dreamed of a simple life filled with family and security. The contrast between who he was and the enigma of his disappearance only deepened the pain. Law enforcement too struggled. They had interviewed dozens of people, chased down countless cut leads, and revisited the crime scene evidence more times than they could count. Owens remained a person of interest, but with no physical proof tying him to foul play, the case remained in limbo. Each time investigators felt they were on the verge of a breakthrough, the trail turned cold again, leaving them with fragments that refused to fit together. Theories swirled among locals, whispered in cafes and workplaces. Some believed Zebb had been targeted because of his interest in the young woman connected to Owens. Others thought the strange staging of his car meant his disappearance was linked to something more sinister, a calculated act to humiliate or send a message. And there were those who clung to the faint possibility that Zebb had chosen to walk away from his life, though those who knew him best dismissed the idea outright. As the case dragged on, a quiet dread settled over Asheville. The idea that someone could vanish into thin air, leaving behind nothing but cryptic clues and aching loved ones, unsettled the community in a way that never fully healed. Zebb Quinn's story was no longer just a headline. It had become a ghost story, one that lingered in the background of everyday life, reminding people how fragile the line between ordinary and unthinkable could be. Years slipped by and the case of Zebb Quinn grew colder, but it never disappeared from the minds of those who had been touched by it. Detectives rotated in and out of the Asheville Police Department, but each new set of eyes brought the same conclusion: the evidence was too thin, the trail too fragmented. Still, Zebb's mother pressed forward, refusing to let her son's name be forgotten. She attended vigils, spoke to reporters, and reminded the public that her boy was more than just a headline. He was a son, a friend, a young man whose future had been cruelly stolen. The strange details of the case continued to baffle. That lipstick mark on the rear windshield, still without explanation, took on a kind of mythic quality in the retellings. Was it meant as a warning, a taunt, or simply a diversion? No one could say. The mysterious page from his aunt's home remained just as troubling, a small technological breadcrumb pointing to a deliberate hand in Zebb's vanishing. Over time, these eerie fragments became the foundation of the story, the haunting symbols of a crime that refused to be solved. Then, in the following decade, Owen's name resurfaced in a chilling way. In 2015, he was arrested and later convicted for the brutal murders of a couple, JT and Candy Codd. The news shook Asheville to its core. Suddenly, the man long suspected of knowing more about Zebb's disappearance than he had ever admitted was revealed to be capable of terrible violence. Investigators revisited Zebb's case, re-examining every statement Owens had given. Could the quiet, hesitant young man from Walmart have fallen victim to the same darkness that claimed others years later? Though no charges were ever brought against Owens in connection with Zebb, the revelation reignited the community's suspicions. For Denise, it was another cruel twist, confirmation that the man tied to her son's last moments was dangerous, and perhaps had been all along. Yet even with this chilling development, the final truth about what happened to Zebb remained just out of reach. The revelation of Owens's later crimes cast a long, unsettling shadow over Zebb's case. For investigators, it felt as though they had been circling the right man all along, but lacked the one piece of evidence that could bring justice to the Quinn family. Owens' conviction in the Codd murders showed a pattern of calculated brutality, the kind of violence that suggested Zebb's disappearance may not have been a random act. Yet Owens never confessed, never hinted at involvement, and without a body, prosecutors had little to build on. The silence around Zebb's fate remained unbroken. For Denise Quinn, the years had become a painful balancing act between grief and endurance. She fought tirelessly to keep her son's memory alive, but the toll was heavy. Each anniversary of his disappearance brought back the raw ache of that first night, the unanswered phone calls, the empty bedroom. And yet her love for Zebb fueled her persistence. She refused to let his story fade into obscurity, because she knew that once people stopped speaking his name, the search for answers would truly end. The case became a kind of folklore in Asheville, a whispered reminder that not all mysteries are solved, and that sometimes the most ordinary-seeming lives can be swallowed by extraordinary darkness. Younger generations, hearing the story for the first time, were struck by the strangeness of the clues. The lipstick, the pager, the unexplained injuries. Older residents carried with them the memory of Zebb's smile, frozen forever in the photographs his family shared. Even in the face of so much uncertainty, one truth stood firm. Someone knew what happened that night in January 2000. Whether it was Owens or another shadowy figure, the answers lay buried in silence, waiting for the day when the right voice might finally break free and tell the story that Zebb himself could not. More than 2 decades have passed since Zebb Quinn disappeared, and yet his absence still echoes through Asheville like a quiet refrain. The young man who once dreamed of independence, of owning his own car and carving out a future, remains frozen in time, forever 18. His case has become a symbol of both heartbreak and resilience, a reminder of how fragile the line is between an ordinary evening and a life-altering mystery. For his family, the loss is measured not just in years, but in moments stolen. Birthdays uncelebrated, milestones unseen, and the everyday presence of a son and brother that will never return. Denise Quinn has spoken of her hope that one day the truth will emerge, even if it is painful, because silence is worse than sorrow. "I just want to bring him home," she has said, a mother's plea that has carried across decades. Investigators still keep the file open, aware that cold cases have a way of warming with time, that advances in technology and the willingness of witnesses to finally speak can turn silence into testimony. The community too holds on, honouring Zebb by refusing to let him vanish completely into memory. His story is retold not for morbid curiosity, but as a call for justice, a reminder that behind every headline is a human life, loved and deeply missed. And so the name Zebb Quinn endures. It lingers in Asheville's streets, in the hearts of those who knew him, and in the restless minds of those who only know his story. A young man left work one January night and was never seen again. Still missing, still unanswered, still waiting for the truth to come to light.